us. This is our very first career speaker. Ms. Nowicki is joining us today, and she is a West Seneca grad. And I don't know, what else should I say? We did not talk about an introduction.
That's fine. Hello, good morning. I go by Miss Blue. I am an interpreter that you will see often. I work downstairs in Miss Murray's classroom with Giselle here. Sorry to put the spotlight on you. So, like Miss Pava said, I am a West Seneca graduate. I graduated from West about 10 years ago, just to tell you that I'm old. I'm trying to think. There were some questions that I can answer. Like, I had no idea. Oh, sorry. Let me back up. So you can see that I'm signing and talking at the same time. That is not normally what an interpreter will do. Because Giselle is here and I am talking at the same time, it is professional and it's most appropriate if I am signing and talking so that everyone has access to what I'm saying. So it's called simcomming when you sign. It's simultaneous communication. Means that I am talking and signing at the same time so that everyone can understand what is going on and no one feels left out because they're isolated and they don't have access to communication. But in a everyday situation, you were more likely to see an interpreter standing up, presenting, signing, no talking. They're not usually the presenter. They tend to be listening and signing to convey the message from whoever is the actual speaker. So I honestly had no idea I wanted to become an interpreter when I was younger. I think in middle school, or no, before that, in elementary school, I thought about becoming a fashion designer. I think later I thought it'd be really cool to be a glass blower, lots of random working with ceramics and art. And then later, when I found that I had a talent for languages when I was in high school, I thought maybe become a spoken language translator. And so after I graduated, I kind of took a detour and I joined the military, and I was in the military for 5 years. And there I did no sign language. I just skipped an entire section of my life, I realized. I'll just let you know, in the future, not everyone is a good speaker, so don't feel nervous if you're ever told to stand up and give a presentation yourselves. So I graduated from high school. I had studied Spanish, later studied French. I went to college in Ohio, and I studied ASL there, American Sign Language. I got my bachelor's degree. After I graduated college is when I decided to join the military. And that put a pause on signing because the military actually doesn't allow deaf people to join. Therefore, they don't really recognize sign language as an actual language. So that was on pause, did my 5 years, came back to the area, and was interested in continuing my studies of sign language in the deaf community, deaf culture, and actually found that there was a local agency here that offered interpreting services, and I contacted them saying, hey, let you know, I studied sign language, I have a degree, have no experience, but I am so motivated to learn, and kind of just went from there. I got hired, and here I am today. Does anyone, to start off with, does anyone have any questions? Ms. Pava?
Is that still the policy for the military?
Yes. So the military still does not allow anyone that is deaf or has a significant hearing loss to join. That's why in the testing process, when you are trying to sign up, they have a hearing test. And then every year, that's part of the yearly physical requirement is to pass a hearing test. Yes.
I was just wondering if there was anyone in your life who really kind of inspired you to want to learn.
So that is a funny, I guess, story. I don't know if it's really funny, but it's kind of ironic. So I went to West Seneca West a while ago. They used to do pre-K there, and when I was there, there was a class that was mixed. It had the mainstream students, and then it had the additional needs students, and some of them were not verbal. And we had an aide that would use sign language to communicate, because sign language actually is not only for the deaf, it is their primary language, but it's also been utilized as a tool to communicate with nonverbal autistics or people who aren't just verbal in general. Sometimes you don't have the physical anatomy, musculature to produce sounds, and so signing can work with that. So I had that class, and there was the aide, and she taught us a few signs, and after that, it just kind of stuck with me. I fell in love with it, and I let it kind of sit there and wait for a few years, and then in high school, I started teaching myself a few signs. Really, I loved music, so I would pick a song and try and find the words that matched all of the lyrics, and I just kind of went from there, and I realized that it was something I wanted to pursue, and so I decided to go to college, and then from there, just went on with that. So it's not a normal story for an interpreter, for sure, because most interpreters tend to have deaf family, deaf friends. Many are CODAs, which means child of a deaf adult. So their parents use sign language, just things like that. Yeah, it's very rare to find an interpreter that has no interaction with the deaf community prior to learning sign language. Other questions? Yes.
How do you say like a person's name or like a proper place that's like not a word?
So for that specifically, it's a very good question. There are name signs, or it would just be spelled out. So the name signs, the very important cultural aspect to that is they are given by a deaf person. They're not something that can be made up. They are given to you. So I do not yet have a sign name, so I just have to spell out my first name when I introduce myself. I have a friend whose name is Erica, so her sign is an E, and it's down here. I've seen I've seen these. I had a teacher. His sign name was this for Larry. They're connected more to the personality of a person instead of like how you spell their name. But for restaurants, it depends. Some have sign names, others do not, so you just finger spell it. For example, Starbucks. This is a sign for Starbucks. McDonald's. But then Tim Hortons is just TH. It's just the initials. So it kind of varies. And also different areas have their own signs, just like in spoken languages we have accents. It's kind of the same type of idea. Any other questions? Yes?
One daughter lives in a group home, and there are deaf housemates, and some of the staff do have, those needs, some of them know their sign language a little bit. Her name is Becky, but because of her hairstyle, what they did is they used how she had her hair behind her ears, and that was the sign for her name.
Yes, that also will happen. It doesn't always need to include the initial, like how I said Larry, or I have a friend Clara, there's a C. Sometimes it is that it's the mannerism that they have, so the tucking it behind, that would count. Are there any other questions? Yes, Ms. Murray.
So something I found fascinating since working with you, and I thought maybe they would find interesting as well, is maybe the difference between like regular sign language versus signs with exact English, and like when it's appropriate to use the two?
That is a good question. So, American Sign Language has many offshoots. It definitely is connected to the history of oppression with the deaf. That happened actually not very long ago, in the mid 1900s. So, one thing, so I am an interpreter for ASL. I can signed exact English, which is SEE, and that means it's more like what I'm doing now with the SimCom, meaning that every word has a sign. But if I were to, it's going to be hard. If I could switch over to exactly signed exact English, it means every single word has a sign, and that includes that, it, the, am, is. Those words get removed in American Sign Language. They're not a part of the grammar, but with signed exact English, they are like that. R is not part of American Sign Language, it's part of signed exact English. For specific uses in school settings, it tends C or PSC, which is a mix of the two, tends to be used because English and American Sign Language are not exact copies of each other. And that's one thing that tends to surprise people. If someone knows American Sign Language, it does not mean that they know English. And American Sign Language is not set up to follow English. It's not just a gestured version of the English language. They're separate. They are the most closely related, yes, but they are not equivalents, just like Spanish does not have an exact equivalent in words for English, kind of like that. But yes, most often if you hear someone's using C, it means that they're trying to learn English, so they're learning the grammar, the filler words, the, that, it, stuff like that.
So ASL is more like big picture signs, almost, would you say? Like
Yes.
the big gist of what you're trying to get across. is
Yes.
what
If
doing
you're,
with
yeah,
ASL.
going from English to ASL, definitely it's more about focusing on, yeah, that larger idea and that larger concept instead of the specific English words that are used to set up a grammatically correct sentence in English. Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Pava. Yes. So that is definitely something that can vary based on areas, just like we have in spoken language. One thing that I myself have just recently learned is chill. And I thought it was just completely made up, and then I've actually seen it used many times. So just like chill. Trying to think of other ones. It's culturally, it depends on if it's the younger generation or the older generation, because the older generation still remembers like being forced to learn English and being forced to learn how to read lips, and so they'll tend to say like that's not a real ASL word, that doesn't exist, that's from English, so it's not the same. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Is that, like I was saying, the oppression of the deaf. At one point in time, they tried to eradicate deafness, and they said that if they learn how to speak, read lips, and it's that they were signing, and that's why they were so focused on staying deaf. That's one of the things about that. So there's definitely a generational difference. I mean, just like any culture, really, there's a generational difference among the people. But when it comes to the language, that's one thing I have noticed in my time working as an interpreter. Yes, Ms. Murray.
Another thing that I thought might be worth talking about a little bit, just of like the culture sensitivity, like deaf culture sensitivity, where if you want to touch on, you know, if someone's coming from a world that's completely deaf, sometimes they might not want their children to be hearing or,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to speak, or, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that, because that could be sensitive to.
Yes, so that's it's definitely a topic that gets discussed when you're academically. There are, so I believe technically the number is 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. So that means only 10% of children are born into a family that understands what their needs are going to be, and understands how they can learn to communicate, what every day, like getting around, adapting to situations. So one thing is there's many people might know it's kind of popular now to see the videos for cochlear implants. And it's important to, it's not my place to have an opinion on that. I'm just going to let you know right now, and I'm not trying to be politically correct or anything. It's just not my place. I'm not deaf. I don't have family that's deaf. It's not my experience. But what I will share is that the one thing that people don't tend to realize is that you're not fixing anything. It's you're adding. So giving someone a cochlear implant doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're turning on their eardrums. It means that you're giving their brain another way to access how to perceive sound. And so it'll never be the same as actually hearing through your eardrums. And that's one thing a lot of people don't realize. So they think, oh, a cochlear implant, it'll solve everything. And that's not really the situation at all. Another thing is it can be tough. Think about if you, I'm trying to think of a good way to give an example. I'll just explain it the best. If you're born deaf into a hearing, and this is aside for hearing, a hearing family. The hearing family, their entire world is based upon hearing what is happening in the environment. It's not about it's not always about looking. They don't rely on their eyes. Yes, it is a sense that they use, but it's you can be looking at the floor and still know what's happening around you because your ears. And so if a hearing family, that's their normal. But if you're born deaf into that hearing family, and a lot of the times they're completely oblivious to deaf culture, American Sign Language, things like that, there's no guaranteed way that they're going to know how to best let the child develop on their own and get their own sense of person as who they are. So it's one thing, it's like Miss Murray said, it's a very sensitive topic for some. Other people, they just think it's a normal occurrence. They think cochlear implant, fix it, whatever. It varies. It's just like any other controversial topic that is in the world today. But that's one thing to kind of think about is if you had no idea, here's a good one, go to Pakistan and you're English speaking. You've never studied Urdu, which is the official language there, or the language mainly spoken there. I apologize. I don't know if it's official. And you are told, go, be about your day. We're going to teach you Urdu, and that is it. And that's basically what it is. You're forcing someone, and that is the problem that people have, is they feel that it is forcing an idea and a culture and a language onto someone without considering their needs as a person. Very long-winded, but it's just one of those big topics. Yes. Yes, that is a very good question. Every major language has its own sign language. I don't want to say every spoken language because obviously there are spoken languages in Africa by tribes there that aren't written, so it's kind of hard to distinguish that. But yeah, so British Sign Language is a good way to introduce that concept. they have a completely, I wouldn't say completely, but they have a different system of sign language there. Their alphabet is using two hands. So where in American Sign Language, you can spell everything on one hand. In British Sign Language, you would use, like, if ABC, American Sign Language. British Sign Language, A, B, C, D, E, F. It's very different. And it's funny because spoken, it's almost the same. I mean, our American English comes from that English, but the sign languages are separate. Same thing with Chinese Sign Language. There is Spanish Sign Language. There's Puerto Rican Sign Language. So, yes, many, many different sign languages. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Okay. So we'll just do a few common signs. Good. Here, let me ask Giselle. Giselle, you want to teach some signs? Come here. Come on. Come on. You teach them good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So this is a sign for good, and this is a sign for morning. And so you just combine them. Good morning. It's a little hard, so don't feel frustrated if you don't understand it right away. Everyone struggles. Yes, it's not as simple as it would seem by just looking at it. This is the sign for hello. Hello. It's same. You can just wave or say hi. Hello. How are you? How are you? Oh. She wants everyone to try. She's asking, how are you? So, how are you? This is a sign for happy. This is Giselle's normal response. Happy. So good is just like good morning. Good. Good. Or if you don't want to do that, that works too. That's still sign language. It's all good. Yeah, Giselle's done. This is done. So Giselle's, I'm done. I'm over it. Trying to think. Oh, I guess because we're in the holiday season, I will teach you Merry Christmas. So there's many different ways some things get said. So one is Merry, which is happy, and then Christmas, which is just a C, and you kind of make like a banner with your hand. So Merry Christmas. Or another way you might see it, the M for Mary. So you take your thumb and then 1, 2, 3, and that's the M. Mary, same movement, Christmas. Yep. So Merry Christmas. That's one sign. There's a sign for a lot of things. Not a sign for everything, but a sign for a lot of things. We have any other questions?
Excuse the interruption. If you haven't already done so, please send a representative from your group to Student Services with your donation envelope with the total on it. Thank you.
Yes.
What, like, what advice do you have for someone who maybe wants to follow in the same career?
So, my career path has been a little bit different. They do have majors in interpreting. That is one type of degree you can get is a bachelor's in interpreting. My bachelor's is specifically in American Sign Language, so it's more about the language itself and the grammar, and cultural aspect a little bit. But my advice would be to do your research. There's one major university here in New York, RIT. They have a separate section, NTID, which is the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. Many of the interpreters that graduate in New York State will come from that university. I myself went to Ohio. I went to Kent State University, and I studied American Sign Language there. UB offers a American Sign Language minor. They do not offer a major, so it's not a degree per se, but you would get the experience. And I guess the most important thing is you can learn the language, but it's really important to learn about deaf culture and the deaf community and their history. That'll give you a big insight about how sign language has been used throughout the years, how it has changed, things like that. Oh, and I will say the last thing is don't stress yourself out trying to figure out what you're going to do now. If you have something you're passionate about, go for it. But like I said in the beginning, I had no idea what I was going to do. When I was in the military, I thought I originally joined the military to become an interpreter or a translator for the UN, and that's with spoken languages, because I was trained to speak Chinese when I was in the military. But then I thought about becoming a social worker. I took some classes on accounting, and now here I am interpreting, and I think I'm going back to school to get my master's in linguistics. So there's really, as much as of a big idea it is right now, figuring out if you're going to college, if you're going to go to a trade school or anything like that, don't stress, dedicate yourself to figuring out if that's the path for you, but don't stress yourself out trying to make sure that your decision is made now. You got a long time ahead of you to figure it out along the way.
That seems like the perfect